Hello, salam, shalom, namaste, sat sri akal, aloha, hola, ciao, bonjour, and buna. It's so awesome to be with you again today. And guess what? We have a very cool guest with us, Francine Tirrell. Did I say your name right, Francine?
Tirrell.
Tirrell.
Yeah.
See, I always mess up with the last name. Thank you for correcting me on that. And Francine is a mindset leadership coach and an energy healer. And I'm so excited to have you on. Welcome, Francine.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Yay. So Francine, I'll ask you to jump right in and tell us more about who you are and what you do.
Sure. So, like you said, I'm a mindset leadership coach. And what does that mean? Right? I really help mostly women in business and entrepreneurs really to get out of their own way. Because I feel like nobody is in our way but us, right? So I help them to learn how to lean more into their feminine energy, become more vulnerable, and set healthier boundaries so that they can live a life of joy and freedom and freedom from that constant chatter that they have in their heads, right? That might be telling them, they're not doing enough, they aren't enough, whatever that is, right? So I help them quiet that chatter and own their amazingness, right? So really shifting that mindset so that internally so that they can have external success.
Nice. I love that. And I 100% agree with you that it is really that inner chatter, the negative judgments and self-blaming and self-criticizing and so forth that we do, it's that's our biggest obstacle.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that I have a Facebook group called She Got Out of Her Own Way because I really do believe that the only person that stops us is ourselves because we listen to that chatter and we then believe it. So part of our work, our healing work is to stop believing those inner voices and really create some new ones.
Yeah. So when you say healing work, tell me more about that. How, when you think about healing work, um, what does that involve for you?
Yeah, so I do hands-on healing, but and that can be a nice addition to the coaching that I do. But when I talk about healing work, it's really inner healing, right? It is shifting our mindset. It is making decisions to really choose differently, right? To respond differently. I believe we can't change other people's behaviors, but we can change our response to them, right? So if we're constantly responding in a certain way to somebody's behaviors, at some point we have to recognize that person is not going to change, but we get the right to change how we respond to it, right? So that's where the healing starts. To part of it, I think, starts with awareness, right, and understanding our responses and behaviors, and then we decide differently and we make different decisions going forward.
Hmm. Very, very cool. And again, I'm with you on board.
Yeah, it's powerful work because we get to do, um, we stop pointing fingers at everyone else that's in our way, or they did this or they said that, and we can start looking at ourselves, right? And what's coming up for us when external things are happening, right?
Mm,
Because we have no control about anything external. We only have control over what is happening internally with us. So we start to shift that, and then the things around us start to shift, right? So when we do the healing, when we work on our own inner peace, and you and I talked about this, right? Then it shifts the world around us,
mm.
right? But we can't fix everyone else because nobody's broken, right? We're not broken. It's just learning to be in alignment with what our true calling is and to heal that.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so you just said at least two really profound things, I think. And I'd love to dig deeper into them with you. The first was, what you were talking about in terms of like you can't heal others. You have to focus on yourself. Um, and that's like a super important, I think, insight because I know s- when we're dealing with people like you and me, and people like you and me, I'm thinking of us as change makers.
Right.
We we are into creating massive positive change in our lives and in the world. That's, we have this consciousness of wanting to create massive positive change in our lives and the world. That is what makes us change makers. It is what I know is what made me want to become a coach and a trainer and a healer and do this work that I do. And at the same time, you know, you're saying and I'm saying that we cannot change others. So what
Right.
are we really talking about,
Well, I think as a coach, I consider myself a guide,
Mm,
right? Like I will tell my clients all day long, I'm not here to tell you what to do. I really believe you have the answers within you.
mm,
And sometimes we can't see our own blind spots, right? I know myself, I have sometimes I've had more than one coach, right, at a time, because even as a coach, I don't see my own blind spots.
yeah,
And so I feel like as a coach and as a healer, my job is really just to hold the space and the energy to help my clients facilitate the change.
mm,
They have the answers, right? I just ask them certain questions or help guide them along their process and give them a different perspective or way to look at things differently.
yeah. I love that. I love that. This makes me think about how over the years I have come to see leadership and the role of leaders also differently, because I know growing up, well, I moved around a bit and I started out my life in India and Pakistan in the Middle East, before we came to America. And in all of those cultures, certainly as I experienced them, it's very interesting that, you know, there is much more of a collectivistic mentality as opposed to like an individualistic culture. And so what happens in that context is that, you know, I was never really taught to think very much of myself as an
Mm,
individual and what role I have to play as an individual or not. It was more about how I'm part of a group and um, doing the best I can to be a great part of the group. And that requires that you understand your place in the group and you understand the rules that allow the group to function smoothly, and then you follow the rules. And so in that kind of a context, um, I certainly never saw myself as a leader or a change maker or, um, you know, as anyone who had much power to influence or create change. And it wasn't until after I came to America and, I started becoming more exposed to a more individualistic mindset. And it's more about who are you? What are your individual values? And what's your individual life mission and purpose? And it began to sort of like shift my view and perspective. Um, but that was also sort of like when I started to think about like what it takes to create change in a different way and a new way. And like in my old context, the leaders were the people who told you what to do, you listened to them, and you did your best to follow what they said. And that's what it meant. Like if you were the leader, you told other people what to do.
yeah.
And
And
now, you're like, no.
No, and I think leadership is, and I've been a leader in corporate too, right? And so I can come at it from that perspective. To me, a leader inspires,
Mm,
right? First, you have to be a leader in your own life
yeah.
in order for you to inspire others,
Mm,
right? So I think that that's the change maker, right? Being able to inspire others. It's not about telling people what to do. It's not about controlling what everyone does. And there are leaders out there that do that, right? But that isn't leadership, right? That's the difference between leadership and management
uh,
is the controlling piece, right? Management is controlling, leader is inspiring.
mm,
Right. So that's, I think, to me, I think that's the biggest difference, especially if you're in a corporate type environment. But just in general, leaders inspire. They don't. And I do think that, you talk about you were part of a group, but I do think in order to be part of a group, you have to know who you are individually first, right? So that you bring that to the group. So I don't know that they're separate. I just think that in order for you to be part of a group, you have to be an individual first.
mm. Yeah, that's actually a very interesting idea too, because um, I think I think, hmm, I think depending on the culture you are in, what you're saying, Francine, I think works or not, because I think at a very fundamental level, you're absolutely right. Um, so for example, in our more collectivistic cultural context, the way that comes into play is that, you're never just one group. Like you're always living in a society where there's multiple groups that you're always a part of. So for example, in India, I was part of my family group. I was part of the Muslim community group, but then I was also an Indian, right? I was also a student. I was also like I had other identities. And so, for example, if I'm in spaces where different identities of mine are coming into play, like for example, my Muslim identity, and I'm hanging out with non-Muslim people, and I don't know who I am as a Muslim,
Hmm.
then it causes problems, right? Because then I'm like, oh my God, who am I? What do I do? How do I act? So I have to know who I am as a Muslim so I can maintain that identity and stay in integrity with that identity, even as I'm interacting with my larger community group that has many non-Muslims in it. So you're absolutely right. But at another level, like my identity as an individual doesn't matter in those contexts. For example, like even to this day, if you talk to my mom, who is, a classically traditional conservative kind of a person, you ask her to talk about herself. Like if you're in a gathering, like this has happened so many times. Like I'll take my mom with me to some meeting or event, and we'll be introducing ourselves, and it'll come to my mom to introduce herself. And the way she introduces herself is, I am Samia's mother, and my father did this, and my husband does that. And, like basically everything that she talks about herself is in the context of her different relationships.
So it's so, I love that you're talking about this. I actually run a workshop on who you be, right?
Uh,
And it's not what you do, right? And we do, as a society, when somebody says introduce yourself,
yeah.
we go through our to-do list and our checklist of all the things we've accomplished, right? So being your mom, right? And it's what we do. What I do is I take my clients to what are their values and who do they be? So like my top who I am is fun, connection, and enthusiasm. So if I'm not connected to someone and it's not fun, right? So you talked about you have to be, when you said when I'm with people that are not Muslim, I need to be clear in who I am as a Muslim,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
that's who you be,
Yeah.
right? And that goes back to your values. So it doesn't matter where you are because you're going to bring that to whatever you're doing, right? And the doing is being the Muslim, but who you be is why it's not even an issue for you, right? So for me, I had a Zoom with somebody yesterday that I met, and she gave me a compliment by just like the 30 minutes we were talking. Just I bring my enthusiasm to these calls, and it's not phony and it's not fake, and right, because that I really enjoy it. Now, if you had seen me earlier when I was balancing my checkbook, right, that wasn't as fun because there's nobody involved, right? It isn't fun, and there's no enthusiasm. So when you know who you be and you bring that to all that you do, it makes such a difference.
I love that. I absolutely love that. Ah, so that makes me think about, again, when we're being change makers, and so we're not trying to change anyone else. This is the perspective we're advocating for. So you're saying, okay, so be clear on who you are, who you're being, and be that. So in that context, can you tell me more about how you help yourself heal, and then how that allows you to create change?
Sure. I think some of the things, there's a couple of things, right? But I think one of the biggest things that I work a lot with my clients on are being vulnerable and
Mm,
creating boundaries.
mm,
Because the women that I work with are really women that are doing for everyone else.
mm.
And, they're not even on their to-do list, right? They're exhausted, they're overwhelmed. So it's teaching them how to say no, right? And to create a boundary. And that's a really hard thing to do. But when you actually, there's a couple of things when we set boundaries. When we don't set boundaries and we're helping everyone else, what we're saying to them is, I don't trust that you can do it on your own.
Mm.
So when we actually can take a step back and say, okay, I'm not going to fix what so-and-so's doing. I'm going to let them do that. Or then you're actually giving them the power. You're empowering them to do it, whether they do it right, wrong, or indifferent, right? But you're saying to them, I trust you and I believe in you.
Yeah,
And you're also giving yourself the timeout that you need,
right.
right? And then being vulnerable, and this is my own hard work, right? Because I do not like this vulnerability thing, right? And I've been doing this work forever, and sometimes it's asking for your needs to be met,
Mm.
right? Like, I need this from you. And
Yeah.
that's icky and ugly and can be really uncomfortable. And it's also really powerful because we assume people know what we want or need, right? I
Mm.
mean, how many times do you have conversations with people, well, they should have known XYZ, right? Well, how? How would they have known if you didn't tell them, right? So being able to say, hey, I was really hurt by what you said the other day or what you did, and being okay with the fact that they may not respond the way that you want them to respond.
Mm.
They may, but you've said your piece and you haven't allowed yourself to dwell in the woulda, coulda, shouldas, right?
Yeah.
So
Yes.
I think those are two really big things that I work a lot with my clients on.
Mm.
And sometimes it's simple, right? Like I had a situation, my own exercise, somebody asked me for something and I immediately knew what the answer was going to be, but I waited to respond,
Mm.
right? Because my normal instinct is, and I do that a lot, right? Like people reach out to me because I am the person that people come to. So what my exercise is don't respond immediately,
Mm.
right? Wait an hour, even sometimes a day, depending upon what it is and if it can wait.
Yes.
But that is me creating the boundary for me and
Yeah.
not jumping right in and going, yes, I can fix that. Yes, I have that information.
Mm.
Yes, I have what you need, where it's taking a breath.
Yes. Oh my
It's
gosh.
retraining myself is what it's doing.
Yes. Yes. And that way you're not only doing something good for you, giving yourself some room to breathe
Right.
and so forth, but you're actually helping the other person in a much, much better way. I remember um, I think it was one of the doctors or therapists who was helping us figure out how we could best work and help my brother, who is like he has a genetic disorder, and because of that, like his it's like a neuromuscular degenerative condition. So over time, his muscles are becoming weaker and weaker. And, at this point, he's actually wheelchair bound. But even like many years ago, when his condition was starting to have a significant impact on his abilities to do things for himself, and we were trying to figure out how we could best help him. We were working with different doctors and therapists, and I still remember to this day, one of them, he was like, you need to let him do things on his own. Like you'll want to, like for example, um, um, when it comes to eating time and he's trying to serve himself, you might see he's having some difficulty. It might be slow work for him to, serve himself and all of that. But don't immediately jump in and do it for him. You need to let him do it for himself, because that is how he's going to be able to maintain a certain amount of like ability to continue to do these things for himself and learn new different ways to do things for himself. Um, because as his muscles become weaker, he needs to learn to adjust. And so you have to give him that time and that opportunity. And that will allow him to feel more empowered and better about himself. Because if you just do everything for him, that means he's always dependent on you. If you're not there, then he can't do
Right.
anything.
And the message you're sending him is, I don't believe you
Yeah,
can do it.
right. And so
Right?
it's like
Yeah.
actually really harmful for him on multiple levels.
Right.
And so it's like in my brother's case, that was like really easy to see and understand for me. But I think it was harder for me to apply that same level in other contexts with people who don't have physical disabilities.
Right. Right. Well, and for myself, like I have a rescue archetype, right? I'm the person that people come to and I instantly see a problem and I want to jump in. So I've had to learn how to create my own boundaries, right? Because I think as coaches, as healers, right, we do it because we want to help. So then we have to learn how to create the boundary, right? So that we're not constantly giving so much and then depleting ourselves,
Yeah,
right? Because then that's what ends up happening is that we end up depleting ourselves and then we really can't be here for all the people that need what we have to offer.
that's right. That's right. And also, I think from a spiritual perspective, it's just a very unwise thing to do,
Right.
because then if you're trying to rescue people, you're really trying to control outcomes.
Yep.
And like, oh, I'm going to control outcomes for what happens in your life.
Well, I refer to
But
myself as a control freak in recovery. And part of my need for control was to feel safe, right? If I knew that this was going to happen this way, then I felt okay,
yeah,
right? So I wasn't, that was some, that's also some work I do with my clients because it's also work that I've had to do, right? Really trusting that, not knowing what's going to happen when you and I end this podcast, right? And being okay with that,
yeah,
right? And instead of spiraling in the what ifs and oh my gosh, now what if I didn't say that right? What if we've got to redo this? I said something stupid, right? So we have to be willing, and this goes back to being vulnerable, right? Like not having the control, not being in control is also being willing to be vulnerable and just trusting what is,
yeah,
and that everything's going to be okay no matter what the outcome is.
yes. Oh my gosh, this just made me think. Recently, I've been watching a lot of Netflix. And I got into watching like all these different superhero shows. So I was watching, for example, The Flash.
Okay.
I was, and also like The Legends and a bunch of superhero shows. But one of the things that I noticed as a theme in so many of these superhero shows is like, for example, The Flash. He's like, okay, I'm the Flash. I'm responsible for helping people, saving the world even, right? And there are times when, despite his best efforts, things don't turn out very well. Like things go really, really wrong.
Right.
Sometimes people will die or other massive um, strategy, tragedies will happen, right? And then the Flash, he'll be like, no, oh my God. He like literally feels so like responsible that he couldn't save these people or that other bad thing he couldn't prevent from happening. And then, he's having like this like whole crisis, where he's feeling inadequate and what's like he's no good you know and then some other character, usually his girlfriend, or now they're married where I am in the series. So she'll be like coming in and she'll like try to comfort him and be like, no, 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 don't you're not responsible, this is not your fault. um but it's like this theme keeps coming up, and it keeps coming up again and again in so many of these shows with so many of these superhero characters, where they take on all this responsibility, um and to the extent that they're not able to let go of it, it
Mhm.
actually compromises their ability to do their thing. Because I remember there were a few episodes where um, you know, um, he was like, no, I can't, like, he literally froze up. Like he couldn't do what he needed to do because he was like so concerned about the consequences.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I ask myself and clients the question when something bad, what we perceive as bad is like, how is this the best thing that's ever happened to you? Right? Like, what are you learning from it?
Mhm.
And, what can you change? Whenever I start to get anxious or worried about something, I look at like, can I actually change the outcome? And I can't, right? COVID was a big lesson in that for me. In the very beginning, one of my closest friends had COVID. And, this was back in March of 2020 when we still didn't know a lot. And I had been laid off from my corporate job in December before COVID happened. So it was scary, right? And I didn't know what was going to happen with my husband's job. And I was having some anxiety. And my friend said to me, well, what are you worried about? I said, well, I'm worried my friend's going to die and my husband's going to lose his job. And she said, so what? And I was like, she's right. Like there was nothing, whether either of those happened,
Yeah.
me worrying about what might happen, my friend ended up being fine. And my husband actually got a new and better job in COVID, right? So like I spent all this time and energy worrying about something that never happened.
Mm.
And that was, so I bring myself back to that a lot if I'm worried about something and go, okay, well, is there actually anything I can do? Right. And I'm also creating a story. I was creating a story that my friend was going to die. I mean, I went through the who's going to call me, how will I know, right? And then with my husband, well, what would we do? Like I was creating a plan
Mm.
for something that actually never happened. And that's energy that just could be spent
Yeah.
so much better, right? So it's bringing yourself back to like I really don't have any control over the outcome.
Mm.
Only my response
Yeah.
to what's happening now.
Yeah. And a certain amount of planning, I suppose, is not was helpful, like implement you
Absolutely.
did. But it's
I've got
about
my to-do list of things I need to get
yeah,
done in the day, right?
right. But it's like for me, it's not about, oh, whether I plan or not for these eventualities that might happen, but it's more a question of how is my mental health? Am I stressing and worrying
Right.
about it? Or am I doing what needs to be done, including in the context of planning, but staying calm and happy
Right.
and
Right.
so forth. So nice. So there was one other really profound thing that you said, and I would love to go back to that
Yes.
and talk more about that. You said, okay, I might not quote you exactly, but it was something to the effect of, we're not really broken.
Mm.
Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think any of us are broken, right? I think, depending upon what your spiritual beliefs are, right? I believe we all come here with a purpose, right? If you believe in sacred contracts, right? I believe we all have a contract to be here for whatever our contract is. And I think some of us are doing some work on this plane and, to do this deep spiritual work. And it doesn't mean I'm broken. It just means I call it excavating, right? Like kind of excavating what's inside, right? And that doesn't mean if somebody isn't doing the work that there's anything wrong with them. That's just their journey in this lifetime, right? Just like my journey is to do some consciousness work, right? But it doesn't mean that, and I think even, I don't think there's any good or bad, right? Like it just is. And decisions are not right or wrong. What we do is not good or bad. We put labels on it, right? Based on society rules or our own personal beliefs, whatever it is. But if we could recognize that we aren't broken and there is no right or wrong and just accept ourselves and others just because we're all on our own journey and we all have different choices of how we're riding the journey.
Yeah. I think I would like you to give an example. Okay, so let me give an example first, and then I would love for you to sort of give an example to explain, help people understand even better what you're saying, because for so many people, they hold this perspective and this belief and this feeling that they are broken. I know for me, I used to hold that perspective. I'm a survivor of child sexual abuse. And, I would, you know, I would feel broken. Like I would feel damaged. I would feel like unlovable because I felt so broken and so messed up. It's like if and that was the fear or the belief, the feeling that I had that prevented me from sharing with anyone what had happened to me, what I had experienced for like literally 2 decades. Well, 1 decade of complete silence. And then I told one person and then took me another decade before I got around to telling my family, which was like, probably the really big breakthrough that I had. But it like took me 2 decades to get to the point where I was able to tell my mom and my dad that I had survived child sexual abuse and all that. And I held onto that fear of, oh my gosh, if my mom finds out how ugly things are inside of me, she won't be able to love me anymore. And it was such a devastating thought and feeling to have, to think that my mom wouldn't be able to love me because I'm so messed up on the inside. Um, um, yeah, and I know so many other people now that I work with and who have been through terrible things in their lives, and they're holding on to that perspective of we're broken.
And I do think horrible things happen, absolutely. And I think it's how we shift that, right? So I get that you can feel broken, but what I'm saying is I would venture to guess that that situation really probably makes you an amazing coach right now too, right? So I believe, and I guess maybe that's what I'm trying to say is like whatever happens to us has some type of outcome, right? So as a result of situations that occur, that's what helps us in our path. So yes, that feeling of brokenness, you had to go through that 20 years
Mm.
in order to have that breakthrough, I guess, if you will, right? So that you can now be the coach that you are, the coach and the healer that you are, right? So we do experience horrible things in our lives, but what we decide to do with them, so we again, I believe in conscious choice. We have a choice of, so you could have sat your whole life in that feeling, but and there's no judgment over how long it took you because that was part of your process, right? So then you made the decision of, I don't want to feel this way anymore. I'm going to start sharing this, right? So you knew something inside of you knew you needed to share this and get rid of that belief that your mom wasn't going to love you, right? So yes, horrible things happen and we feel broken, but I think what we decide to do with our experiences is also what where there's power, right? So we get to make a choice of how we show up with hard things.
Yeah, yeah, I'm with you on that. And I think for me, it wasn't so much a choice of not wanting to feel broken anymore, but it was more that I just couldn't bear it anymore. In
Mm,
that, like I couldn't not, like, the first person I ever told, that was like 10 years, some 10 years after I had that traumatic experience. Like I was like, if I don't tell someone, I'm going to die, because I've been struggling for all that time to try and help myself, and I couldn't. Like, I'd done the best I could, and I was
right.
still
Well, and I think
suffering so
the
much.
healing work, deep
Yeah,
healing work, sometimes you have to get to that breaking point
yeah,
in
yeah,
order for it to happen, right? Like
yeah,
you our sometimes our healing happens when we just can't take the pain anymore.
yeah. It was like, reach out for help and hope that the person I reach out to will help me.
Right.
And it was like, because if I don't, then I literally I can't live anymore. So yeah, like for me, it was reaching
Yeah.
that point. I wasn't empowered at that time to be like, no, I don't want to feel like this
There's
anymore. Or
anyone.
I don't believe this anymore. I still
Right.
believed it, but I was just desperate enough that,
Right. And
yeah.
I do think that healing comes at a breaking point,
Mm,
right? Like
mhm.
when you just can't handle the pain anymore, it's time to start doing the healing. And whether it was a conscious thing for you or not, but it probably, is it what started you on your healing journey?
Yeah, I think even before that, I was already on the healing journey.
Okay.
That's why I think one of the cool things about our humanness, about our humanity, or the way we work, is that as soon as we get hurt, our body, our mind, our heart starts to do whatever it can to begin the healing process and to protect us and keep us safe. Um, and it's just that in the early stages of that healing process, one of the best things, because I was a kid, I was like an 8-year-old kid. One of the best things my brain could do at that time was to disassociate. and
Sure.
to go into a sense of denial and suppression of
Right.
a lot of the memories and the feelings and so forth. And that was in some not in yeah, that was a part of the healing process too,
Absolutely.
because at
Yeah.
that time that
It's what
was the
protected
best.
you.
Exactly, it was the
Yeah.
best that I could do. Like I couldn't cope with the emotions. I didn't know how to cope with the emotions or heal them or transform them. And so at that time, the best that my brain could do to help me heal was to suppress and
Right.
deny and all that. But then as I developed the capacity, as I grew older, then other things could happen, you know.
Yeah.
Um,
Nice.
so, hmm, cool. So do you have any last words of wisdom for us to share?
Last words of wisdom. And there's so much, right? We talked about a lot. But I think the biggest thing is being willing to put yourself first
Mm,
doesn't mean that you're selfish, doesn't mean that you don't care about other people. It's actually, I always use the analogy of when you're on the plane and they say put the oxygen mask on you first, right? It really is about taking care of yourself first in order to be able to help or take care of others,
mm,
right? And, asking for what you need and being okay that you may not get it, but being willing to put yourself out there and being vulnerable and setting those boundaries that say, sorry, I can't do lunch today, but I'd love to see you in February, right? And telling people this doesn't work for me.
I love that. I love that. And I'm having such a fabulous time chatting with you. I'm so sorry we have to end for the day. But yeah, I hope you will come back and we can keep
Absolutely.
chatting.
So much fun chatting.
Thank you so much, Francine. And for all of our wonderful listeners, please know that we are adding Francine's links so you can connect with her in the show notes. So please make sure you check out her links, click on them, connect with her. I'll also have my links in case you want to get in touch with me. And until we connect next time, I just wish you lots and lots of peace and joy.